Hi, my name is Coltebear, and I've chosen to use clips as my form of creating an audio depiction for my reflection on the PICRAT and TPAC models, and just how I have seen these evident in my classroom or what I plan to do in the future regarding these models. I would first like to talk about the TPAC model and this theory and how it relates to my personal classroom. For me, this was an interesting theory that it was interesting to see the development of it over time and just how much this model has changed since 2000 when it was first introduced and the different parts and how the authors worked at it continuously and it evolved over time into something that was much more beneficial to teachers, educators of all sources. Now, for me, it is very important that I try to develop this in my classroom where I try to find a balance between using technology in an effective way with the pedagogical knowledge that I have and how I interact with my students and how I'm improving that each day, as well as with my content knowledge. Now, I'm a fourth year teacher, and thinking back to my first year, my content knowledge was definitely the strongest point. I was fresh out of college, I knew a lot about what I was teaching, and I felt that I could explain it in a good way. But the pedagogical side was a little bit tougher. Learning the ins and outs of teaching, trying to figure out where are students going to struggle, what are the social and emotional background challenges that I'm going to have, as well as just trying to teach math, which at the high school level can be difficult, especially because I teach geometry and algebra 2. And oftentimes, algebra 2 is the point where students kind of like cap out with math. They don't go far beyond that. So, understanding where they're going to struggle, what I can do to help them be successful. And then, lastly, is the technological side. I feel that I am very open to using technology in my classroom. That's not something that I am against by any means, but it can be difficult. Just trying to find a balance of using technology in an effective way that would help not only me, but my students understand what they're learning. How can I apply math with technology and share that information in an effective way? So I made a few notes that I wanted to talk about regarding this. The first was using technology as a resource to make classroom tasks easier. Right now, I am showing this part of the video in OneNote, which is what I use for all of my classes. You can look off to the side here. And this is my main form of note taking. And I actually have an example for my Algebra 2. This is my Unit 2, and it just has, this is where I have all of my students take their notes as I lecture typically in the beginning, or if they need to watch a video if they're gone, I have those types of resources. But it just has examples provided, and we are fortunate to have iPads for each student, so that helps as well. The next part is scaffolding my teaching using technology to help students learn from a base level and expand to points of creation via technology. So where can I take their base knowledge of what they've learned in my class and expand it to the next step, trying to get to like that analytical step, even that creative step as talked about in the PICRAT model and in other forms. Being confident in my content to thoroughly explain each lesson with a thorough and understandable approach. I am pretty confident in what I teach now, especially because I've taught the same classes for 4 years. I know where students typically will struggle, but it's still having a deep understanding for myself and being able to relay that to my students to help them develop a better understanding. Lastly, meeting the needs of my students and helping them develop a conceptual understanding through the use of technology. It's trying to find this balance where I can not only teach in an effective way with the content that I know, but how can I take technology and bring it to that next step? I feel like a lot of the times I am in this part. I'm successful here with the pedagogical content knowledge and what I can do with those, but I would like to get more into this zone here, and it'll develop with time and being willing to try new things and learn as I go along with my students. The next part that I wanted to discuss was the PICRAT model and just a few ideas that I was able to take away with this regarding my own classroom and trying to reflect on where do I fall on this matrix. And most of my teaching with the use of technology, I would say, falls into the first column, where I am replacing a lot of what I would normally do, let's say 10 years ago, if I was a math teacher then, how would that have looked differently as compared to today? And for a lot of things like homework, videos, worksheets, anything along those lines, I'm just replacing them and having my students do their work on their iPad and typically in OneNote like what I'm using right now, just because they're comfortable with it. A lot of other teachers use it. I'm comfortable with it. It's functional in an effective way, and it keeps all of their information stored in one place, which is really nice. They don't have to have a different notebook for each subject, which is also very convenient. I would like to get more into the amplifies and transforms. So I think that for a few of my activities, which I'm going to show here, one of them, it falls under the amplification category where I can use technology to benefit my students and take it to the next level. I have not quite achieved the transforms. I don't think that I'm creating lessons that are as long lasting as they potentially could be through the use of technology. I think that that takes a lot of time and effort and research, and I'm not quite there yet. Each year I get better and better, but I hope to work and hopefully find a few opportunities in my class to get to that level. Now, on the student scale, passive, interactive, creative, I would say that most of my lessons fall under the passive, where I introduce the information to them. Sometimes they're going to get interactive when I do something like an investigation, which I love to do in geometry. And I'm going to show you an example of that here very soon. The creative part is something that I think is very important for students to be able to produce artifacts, produce work where they feel confident, and it's going to become much more long-term, long-lasting effect for them. It would definitely be a challenge to create a multitude of experience in the creative and transform column. So this to me is the pinnacle of what this model is trying to get to. And it's not going to be realistic to expect that every single lesson is going to be there. I think even the best teachers in the world would struggle with that, because it's taking all of the necessary steps building into a lesson like that. It just can't happen over time. You are going to have some lessons that fall in the first column. It's just going to replace, and it's going to be passive because of the material that you're covering. It can't all be in that final stage. And I think that this would be a student and teacher co-learning model a lot of the times, especially in the third column where you're trying to get to that creative, transformative section. I'm going to be learning just as much as my students are. And thinking back to our book, the innovator's mindset, and how that is really important that we show students how to learn as we go too, because we are lifelong learners as teachers. And if we can model that for them and show how we overcome these challenges together, then it's just going to be that much more effective. Now, what I wanted to demonstrate here was, so as I showed earlier in the video, I would say that this is just a replacement form of notes. It's effective because it's all in one location. Students don't have to download things multiple times a day, and I can have it all formatted the way that I like, and it goes over examples that they can refer back to. This would be more of the replacement and the passive, where they're just being introduced to it. Whereas something like this is an investigation for one of my geometry classes, where students are working collaboratively. I have this activity where they work in groups, they work collaboratively to try and investigate the knowledge before I just tell them straight out. So they're actually interacting, and they can use technology such as, for this, they would need a protractor and a ruler, but we have apps designed to help out with that, and they can effectively measure their angles and sides in order to do this activity. And I think this would be more under that amplification of using technology to their advantage to try to see the math for themselves rather than me just telling them.